Israel announces striking military sites in Iran. Smoke rises in northern Israel with the sound of sirens and an explosion heard. And the Palestinian death toll rises to 42,924 fatalities, 100,080 and 833 injuries. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time and you're watching Q News. We begin today's bulletin with the latest escalating regional tensions. Israel has announced striking military sites in Iran that came as Iranian local media reported that in return its air defense systems have continuously fired at apparent incoming projectiles. Israel described the action as retaliation for what it claims were Tehran's recent attacks on Israel earlier this month. Iranian media reported multiple explosions over several hours in the capital and at nearby military bases, though there were no immediate reports of damage or casualties.
جمهوری اسلامی ایران با تمام قوا پشت سر مقاومت همچنان خواهد ایستاد. We can now confirm that we have concluded the Israeli response to Iran's attack against Israel.
Iran has announced that its air defense successfully detected and countered the Israeli attack despite the limited damage. The Tasnim news agency, citing an official, has refuted Israel's claims that 100 military aircraft were involved, calling it an exaggeration. Iran's air defense reported that Israeli attacks focused on military sites in Tehran, Khuzestan and Ilam. The Israeli military has announced it has completed targeting and precise airstrikes on military targets in Iran, describing the operation as a response to continuous attacks from the Iranian regime against Israel. Spokesperson Daniel Hagari further added that if Iran initiated further escalation, Israel will be compelled to respond.
Beginning a new round of escalation, we will be obligated to respond.
Israeli media sources have reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant conducted a security assessment with top officials reviewing the objectives of Israel's strikes on several Iranian sites. Reports also said Netanyahu received a briefing on the military plans included in Israel's response to Iran. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid has criticized Israel's decision not to target strategic and economic sites in Iran, asserting that Tehran should have paid a higher price. While Israel claims it hit major targets, Iran downplayed the strikes as weak with limited impact. Iranian media have in turn stated that Tehran's policy on aggression is to respond appropriately without haste, noting that Israeli attacks, though minor, cannot be ignored. The Pentagon has announced that U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin received updates from his Israeli counterpart Yoav Gallant on Israel's strike in Iran. Austin reportedly emphasized bolstering U.S. forces in the region to protect American and Israeli interests and sought further details on Israel's response. American media, citing a senior official, have reported that U.S. President Joe Biden encouraged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to launch an attack on Iran, aiming to deter Tehran from future assaults. A senior Biden administration official was also cited saying that any Iranian response to Israel will have consequences. Reports from American media have said that Israel's strikes included military targets across Iran, with planning intended to maximize impact. Reuters cited a senior White House official saying that Washington is fully prepared for any Iranian to ensure its response is proportionate and minimize civilian risk. Tensions in the Middle East have escalated dramatically as the Israeli occupation army launched targeted strikes on Iranian military sites. This operation, framed as retaliation for recent Iranian attacks, raises concerns over a potential cycle of violence in the region.
In a significant escalation in Middle East tensions, the Israeli occupation army conducted targeted strikes on Iranian military sites early on Saturday, October 26th. Israel announced that it had completed precise strikes on military targets in Iran, framing the operation as retaliation for recent attacks allegedly launched from Iran. These strikes followed an Iranian missile barrage on October 1st, in which approximately 200 missiles reportedly targeted Israeli positions, resulting in at least one fatality in the West Bank. Israeli officials characterized the missile barrage as a severe provocation, asserting that Iran had crossed a critical line. An Israeli military spokesperson warned that if the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, Israel will be obligated to respond. In Tehran, multiple explosions were reported in the early hours, with state media showcasing the city's air defense systems intercepting incoming projectiles. Iranian sources indicated that military bases in western Tehran had been attacked, although initial reports did not confirm significant damage or casualties. International reactions varied. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, speaking in Samoa, reiterated Israel's right to self-defense while urging Iran to refrain from retaliation. Meanwhile, reports indicated that the United States was informed of Israel's planned strikes shortly before its execution, but emphasized that American forces were not involved. The attack elicited strong international reactions as numerous countries condemned Israel's military actions against Iran. This recent exchange highlights the fragile nature of Israel-Iran relations, with both sides poised for potential further escalation in an already volatile region.
Well, welcome back, and for more analysis, we now move to Salma in our newsroom. Salma.
Thank you, Mona. For further analysis on the escalating regional tensions, we are joined from Beirut by the strategic expert, Brigadier General Marcel Bellugi. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Bellugi, on Qnews. First off, in light of the long-running confrontation between the two countries, How do you view the latest Israeli strike against Iran?
Good evening. What happened is actually normal. It's been studied and been designed by the Israelis and Americans, and even Russia have informed Iran that a strike will be done. Therefore, there were 4 indicators to show that the strike is heavy or not. The laboratories in Isfahan was targeted, and there was a larger laboratory in Isfahan that was built by the Chinese and the Russian in order to enrich uranium. These 4 sites that were targeted show whether the strike was heavy or not, but fortunately none of these sites were targeted. Plus, Iran have mentioned that these strikes didn't really cause huge damage to its institutions.
Sir, like you've mentioned, Iran said that it was successfully able to counter these strikes in 3 provinces, including Tehran. Why did Israel decide to limit the strike against Iran then?
Israel have sent about 100 jets to show or to make an exercise of power and tried not to hit important targets. This strike, to begin with, was actions and to help Harris. This also was a limited airstrike in order to avoid a total war on several fronts and to avoid targeting nuclear sites, and in order not to escalate the war and in order not to lead to a total war. Both America and Iran do want a large-scale war. However, Israel is always keen to escalate and to lure everybody to enter into war. This Israeli airstrike will be paid dearly by Lebanon, and because many of the Iranian allies are in Lebanon, and they will surely escalate whether Hezbollah or Hamas. Hence, as a result of this airstrike, more violence and escalation will be made.
Now, regarding the United States, which always reaffirmed Israel's right to defend itself against Iran, what role did it play in containing the Israeli strike against Iran? Regarding the United States, what role did it play in containing the Israeli strike against Iran?
The airstrike was expected to happen, and it was meant to target some of the IRG sites and some of the economic institutions, but to avoid hitting oil infrastructure and to avoid hitting the Iranian nuclear reactors. Russia says that Israel have honored its agreement with Russia and tried not to escalate. Hence, there is no Iranian retaliation strike on site, whether through direct missiles or through its proxies, as what happened 1.5 months ago. What is expected is that there will be no escalation, no total war. However, Lebanon is expected to pay a heavy price by escalating the situation with Israel. And Israel will not directly get involved with a total confrontation with Israel.
That was the strategic expert, Brigadier General Marcel Baluji. Thank you so much for your insights. Now we're going to move back to Mona for more news and developments around the world.
Thank you so much, Salma, for the analysis. And in related news, American media citing an Israeli official have confirmed that Israel's recent targets in Iran were not oil or nuclear sites. Reports also indicated that Israel focused on locations that previously posed a threat to Tel Aviv and may do so in the future. Iran has denied that any oil production sites were targeted during Israel's strike on multiple locations. An Iranian official confirmed oil output is proceeding normally. Meanwhile, American media reported that Israel's targets were solely military, not nuclear or oil related, following warnings from both the US and Iran against attacks on these critical areas. It has reported that US officials anticipate a restrained response from Iran to Israeli strike, which could halt reciprocal attacks. Tel Aviv warned Iran it will launch a more forceful response should Tehran retaliate, with Israeli officials hoping this strike will end the cycle of mutual targeting. Tehran has resumed flights after a brief suspension due to Israeli strikes on multiple military sites. A spokesperson to Iran's civil aviation organization confirmed operations to return to normal at 5:30 GMT. Previously, the aviation authority had suspended all routes, and radar images showed planes avoiding Iranian airspace. Now we move to the latest developments in Gaza. The Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October 7, 2023 has risen to 42,924 reported fatalities, with an additional 100,833 individuals sustaining injuries. Israeli occupation forces committed 7 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 48 hours, resulting in the killing of at least 77 Palestinians and the injury of 289 others, according to medical reports. The United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, has said that the rate of evacuating children from the Gaza Strip for medical reasons has decreased from 296 to 22 children per month. Spokesman for the UN agency, James Elder, stated during a press conference that the current rate of evacuating children from Gaza is less than 1 child per day. He added that if this deadly slow pace continues, it will take more than 7 urgent medical care. Three civilians have been killed and others have been injured in the bombing of the Jabalia by Israeli occupation warplanes north of the Gaza Strip. The north of the Strip has been subjected to heinous massacres, ethnic cleansing and forced displacement for 22 days. Since dawn, the occupation forces have been blowing up residential buildings around the Al-Fallujah cemetery in Jabalia camp, while the gunboats are firing towards the coast of Gaza City. Meanwhile, the occupation artillery is shelling heavily in the Nusayrat camp in the middle of the Gaza Strip. Israeli occupation forces have stormed the city of Tulkarm at dawn. Security sources reported that a number of occupation vehicles stormed the city from its western entrance towards Nablus Street, adjacent to Nur Shams camp. They added that the occupation forces surrounded a house in Al Salem neighborhood near Nur Shams camp and targeted it with several shells. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa has stated that women and children account for around 70% of the victims of the Israeli genocide in the Gaza Strip. The Prime Minister said that although women and children account for such a percentage of the total death toll in Gaza, Palestinian women demonstrate daily steadfastness, resilience and defiance in their struggle to regain their human rights. Palestinians in northern Gaza continue to flee their homes and temporary shelters as the Israeli occupation forces carry out a major offensive in the region for a third week. Families were seen carrying their belongings and riding by horse, and most of them were fleeing the urban refugee camp of Jabalia and the broader town of Beit Lahia and Beit Hanun, heading to Gaza City and the Yarmouk neighborhood. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. Israel announces striking military sites in Iran. Smoke rises in northern Israel with the sound of sirens and an explosion heard. And the Palestinian death toll rises to 42,924 fatalities and 100,833 injuries. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. For real-time updates, connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.